At the height of World War II, Soviet military personnel were brought over to Britain on a top-secret mission. The men were all aircrew, and their destination was the RAF base at Errol, near Dundee in Scotland. They were the leading airmen of the Moscow Special Air Transport Group, and their job was to learn to fly an unfamiliar British aircraft to help the Soviet war effort. Following the USSR's entry into World War II on the Allied side after Hitler's 22nd of June 1941 invasion, Britain maintained a very active effort to help support Stalin. Britain was aided in this particularly by Canada, and after December 1941 by the United States. British warships and merchantmen ran the gauntlet of German U-boats and aircraft to deliver desperately needed military equipment and supplies to the Arctic port of Murmansk, with hundreds losing their lives in the icy wastes of the Arctic Ocean. Now a quick word from our sponsor. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. Play more than 2,000 tanks, aircraft, helicopters and ships in dynamic combined arms PvP battles. As an historian, I appreciate that the vehicles in War Thunder span over 100 years of development, from the 1920s to the present day. Every vehicle is incredibly detailed and modeled, offering a highly immersive combat experience. War Thunder has incredible graphics and detail in 4K resolution to create the immersion you need. Play War Thunder now on PC, PlayStation or Xbox using the link on the screen. You receive a large, free bonus pack for registering using my personalized link, including multiple premium vehicles, premium account, boosters, and much more. Less well known was Operation Benedict in July to December 1941, when 2 squadrons of RAF Hawker Hurricane fighters were based in northern Russia and flew combat missions against the Luftwaffe. The RAF's efforts to help the USSR at a time when it was hard-pressed elsewhere was well publicized at the time. The Hurricanes shot down 16 German planes for the loss of 3 British pilots killed. 4 Britons received the Order of Lenin from a grateful Soviet government. In 1943, a first batch of 24 Soviet airmen were flown to RAF Errol to learn how to fly Armstrong-Whitworth Albemarle aircraft. The Albemarles were sold to the Soviet Union to help Soviet transport requirements, a total of 200 aircraft being earmarked for the Red Air Force. Number 305 Flying Training Unit was set up at Errol to provide Red Air Force aircrews with operational conversion training onto the Albemarle, so they could fly the planes back to the USSR themselves. Just getting these Soviet aircrews to Britain was a major exercise in itself, as they had to pass across occupied Europe. The Soviets were ferried to Scotland in RAF Liberator bombers from Kratov near Moscow, while some reached Scotland in RAF Catalina flying boats from Lake Krasno, the first pilots and mechanics arriving at Errol on the 11th of January 1943 as the Battle of Stalingrad was drawing to a close. A group of Soviet radio operators were also sent, studying with the RAF at Prestwick in Scotland. To ferry the Albemarles to Moscow, the Soviet aircrews faced an arduous and very dangerous flight across the North Sea, then across Denmark, Norway, Sweden and the Baltic to Soviet territory, running the risk of interception by Luftwaffe fighters. The only possible defense was to fly the aircraft at very high altitude, and the Albemarles were specially modified to manage this at RAF Shawbury. The training program in Scotland for Soviet aircrew was surprisingly short. In total, each received just 8 flights in the Albemarle, 2 in daylight with an RAF instructor, 2 at night, also instructed, and 4 solo flights. The first ferry flight took off on the 3rd of March 1943, flying through bad weather and suffering icing. After a 9-hour flight, the Albemarle touched down safely at Vnukovo airfield in the Soviet Union. During training, 1 Albemarle was lost, the crew being killed alongside the RAF instructor when it flew into a mountain in Scotland. The Albemarle was designed as a bomber, but its inferior performance in relation to existing RAF bombers saw the type relegated to general reconnaissance and transport duties. 602 would be built, and many would be employed as paratrooper transports and glider tugs, seeing action in both the Normandy landings and later in Operation Market Garden. The Soviets trained in batches of 25 men who lived on the base and wore full Soviet military uniforms whilst in Scotland. 12 more Albemarles departed for the USSR in March and April 1943, loaded with spare parts, tools, and other precious cargo. The flights were very stressful and exhausting. There was only one pilot at the controls for a straight 8 to 10 hours, and the Albemarle had no autopilot to give him a break. Weather was a major problem and very dangerous. As well as being shot at by the Germans, the Albemarles were also occasionally engaged by Soviet anti-aircraft batteries who were unfamiliar with the type. 2 aircraft went missing during the transfers, lost at sea. One was definitely shot down by German fighters. Once the Albemarles were in the Soviet Union, testing revealed that they weren't very good. They were full of technical faults and design problems, but due to needs they continued in service. Eventually, the Soviets officially rejected 100 Albemarles that were supposed to be sent over to them and ordered that 86 that had been built and were preparing to be sent should be modified to correct their numerous technical problems. However, the Soviets then refused to accept the 86 Albemarles, as by now they wanted American Douglas C-47 Skytrains instead. The United States was more than happy to sell the Soviets Skytrains, which led, of course, to the Albemarle contract being eventually cancelled altogether by the Soviet government. But Soviet aircrews did remain in Scotland until April 1944, waiting to hopefully take delivery of de Havilland Mosquito fighter bombers, an aircraft type the Soviets were very interested in, but the British ultimately didn't sell them any, although RAF Mosquitoes would be based in northern Russia later on. As for the Albemarles that actually reached the USSR, 2 were destroyed in accidents, with the remaining examples given to the Red Navy as trainers. None appear to have survived the war. Local people living around the base in Scotland would remember the Soviet aircrews long after the war and well into the Cold War with affection in many cases, and the whole story was pretty much unknown until the early 2000s, when information about this began to leak out. Today there is a memorial at the former airbase in commemoration of the Soviet aircrews who came to Britain in 1943, and some of whom lost their lives both in Britain and on the return journey to the Soviet Union. Play War Thunder now on PC, PlayStation or Xbox using the link on the screen. Remember, you receive a large free bonus pack for registering using my personalized link, including multiple premium vehicles, premium account, boosters and much more. War Thunder, get it now! Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.